Should I start talking now?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you all for coming. This is exciting. It means a lot that you all came out here to do this and be here with me. So, welcome to my senior show in Wonderland. Everything here is kind of a culmination of the things that I've made over the past 4 years and have been interested in. So, yeah, it's kind of crazy to see it all together in one space. In my artist statement, which I meant to print out and the printer is broken, so I'll tell you about it later if you have questions, but I don't have my statement, I just have my show statement. But I talk about like the aha moment when you're making art and you're like, oh my god, I did that, like that's kind of cool. And that being like a big thing, even though like art is such a big thing of what I do, like that's still something that I get excited by and surprised by, and that's one of the things that I love about teaching art as well, is because that never goes away, because everybody's always having those moments. So the aha moment is like such a big thing of like what motivates me to do art. And I think the biggest aha moment, like my first big aha moment, was this drawing behind Gabe, the butterfly koi drawing. I made that actually my freshman year of college, and that was my first kind of like surreal work that I did. And we had to do some sort of drawing that combined two things that didn't really belong together. So, and after I did that, I was like kind of hooked. I was like, I love doing these weird things that don't really make a whole lot of sense. And then after that, I started painting in one of Kelly's painting classes, and she assigned us a final project where we had to create like the first work in a series that didn't actually have to become a series, but it would be a series that we would like maybe think about potentially doing one day. And I never stopped adding to that series, so I kind of came up with this like dreamscape idea of creating a fantastical version of my parents' back patio. It's not in the gallery because I don't really like it anymore, but but it started this thing that I like never really stopped doing, with creating these like kind of like whimsical spaces. And creating like this dreamlike version of these landscapes. Let me go my notes and see. So yeah, also in my show statement I talk about like the influence of dreams a little bit. I'm really fascinated by like just imagery that our brains can create while we're sleeping. I think that's so interesting. So a few of the pieces in here are actual like dreams that I did have, and then I like woke up and like frantically wrote them down, and then I turned them into paintings later. But I love that like there's that thing where you have a dream and it's really weird and complex and it makes sense to you, but then when you're telling someone about it, it like kind of unravels a little bit, and you're like, my sister was there, but like my sister was also Kylie Jenner, but it was my sister, but like she looked like Kylie Jenner, and I love how like those things happen and it like doesn't make sense, but there's still a familiarity to them. So that's kind of like what I like to think about when I'm making my work, is those things that are weird but familiar at the same time, and kind of whimsical. So I hope that people, when they're looking at my work, also kind of find those things that are familiar to them. And then yeah, part of the title in Wonderland comes from allowing myself to be curious and kind of like being in this like mythical dream space, and I hope that people also feel like they're entering into that as well. So yeah.
So I understand in art there's a lot of different ways to start. So for example, like this work right here, your most recent work, what is your thought process what do you do first? Do you sketch it out first, or do you just go right into painting, or do you write the ideas down? Like what's your first step in creating a piece of work like this?
We talked about questions that he was planning on asking. Sorry to expose you like that, but I'm prepared for this one. I used to like to start with a completely fully formed idea and like know exactly what something was going to look like before I started. I think that was helpful in like building technical skills in making my art, but then as I've kind of gotten more into it, I've decided to like sort of step back and loosen the control that I have over my work and and let it sort of speak back to me. So actually in the painting right there, that was one of the first ones where I did that. I had a fully planned idea, and then as I was doing my underpainting, it started to take away the things that I was painting on top of it. And I was kind of working back and forth between underpainting and then actually doing like the flooring. And as I was doing it, it was pulling away all the paint that I had already put on. And instead of fixing it, I decided to let that kind of like be a part of what I was doing and respond to it a little bit. So yes, I do start with a sketch sometimes, and then other times it ends up completely unlike what I started as, especially with like this one. This looked like a lot of different things before it became this, and it was just a lot of trial and error. So, yeah.
Thank you.
What do you like teaching most? Like when you're in your student teaching experience, like where do you feel like the most connected to that practice? And like, what's like your, if you could create like your scenario that you want so bad in the classroom, like what would that look like?
I like dabbling in a lot of materials myself and finding ones that really speak to me. And so, like, if there were an opportunity where students could be working in something that, or like in a lot of different areas that helps them find something that they really enjoy doing and feels like that's their thing, that would be like an ideal scenario. I also, actually, one of my co-teachers is here, coworkers, sorry, and she did like a little project recently where they created safe spaces out of clay, and I think that's a really, I love that idea of creating spaces where, like physically in sculptural form where the students feel safe, and I think that's a really cool idea, so something like that.
I was going to ask if your bird tattoo means anything.
My bird tattoo?
Yes.
Not really. I really like blue herons, and they remind me of my mom, just because I would see them together on walks and stuff, so yeah, just because I like it, but also, yeah.
Where'd you get your dress?
Good
Question
question.
everybody wants to know. I made it, so wanted to make wear one of my creations for my show. This was curtains formerly, and now it is a dress, so yeah.
Very cool.
Are any of these other paintings influenced by like a particularly weird dream, like the Kylie Jenner dream?
The door one on the front was a dream, and it was kind of like that moment before you fell asleep completely, and it's just like almost like a lucid dream maybe, but I was just in this weird desert space, and there was a door, and there's actually a bunch of weird objects floating around, but I didn't add those in the painting, but yeah.
One thing I'm thinking about as I'm looking at everything here is just like this sort of really compelling, charming, like I want to go to these places or see these things, you know, when I'm looking at everything. And I think there's something that can happen too, like when you're making the thing, that it like transforms in a way for you and like either maintains that or becomes this like, I don't know, depending on your experience with the work and how fraught it is when it's coming into existence, can like either feel like someplace you've closed the door on or someplace you can still enter. So I'm kind of curious if there are places here, like if you have an experience like, oh yeah, this place, like when I look at it, I just feel like I'm entering this other sort of headspace.
Yeah, I think especially with like my larger paintings, I have that sort of feeling, and that's something even though like sometimes like the subject material kind of feels a little bit odd and a little unsettling. I don't want it to feel that way, so it's like worlds that I want people to feel like they're invited into, because they're worlds that like do feel kind of real to me, and I think part of like kind of like with this painting in particular, as I was like really struggling with it, I was trying to like transport myself there and kind of see what it looked like Like, what does that look like in my head, so that I can fully like make this place feel realized, so that people can also enter into this space that's like in my head.
Does the boat or I think that's a greenhouse or a shed or something, do they need it? It's a what?
A little ghost house.
Oh. And also, is it inspired by the Emerald City?
It is not. No. This was actually, it kind of started as an AI experiment before AI was nearly so controversial, like only a couple months ago. And I was like, oh, this is kind of a cool tool for finding like inspiration and stuff like that. And this looks nothing like what it first came out with, and so I like that it doesn't look anything like it because it's fully my own. But I was like, I wonder what it could kind of come up with, like this idea of a floating castle. And it's like this weird castle island thing, and so I took it and I ran with it, and it became this place that's like a place to me. But the boat is so that there's kind of a connection between people and the place. Like I want it to be a place that like could be inhabited. So, yes.
That's a really interesting idea, considering like AI can't distinguish necessarily between fact and fiction. Like, like a photograph that's manipulated versus a photograph that's real, and sort of it eats it all. And like a dream, there's this idea that the memory bank that you have in your brain stores memories of your dreams and actual memories in the same place. Like there's no distinction between where the memories get stored. So, but then it makes me think about how, like, while we think about dreams as this place where we have no control over where our subconscious goes, it feels also in this world of like, just being bombarded by images all the time. Like it also, just hearing you talk and thinking about your work and looking at your work kind of makes me feel like our dreams are really the only space that is completely our own. And that's really interesting. So keep thinking about like I love that. I love like that idea of going into AI but using it, particularly the way that it relates to your work and your thinking. I think that's really interesting. So thanks.
Thank you.
Can you, I promise this isn't a staged question. I've seen most of your pieces in here except the yarn, and I just find that the moss, I can't take my eyes off of that. I'm just captivated by that. So can you talk a little bit about your process with that? I know fabric and material has been very meaningful for you. So I'm just looking at that and thinking, did she find the yarn first and do that? Or did she just have it and decided, oh, I can make this look like that? I'm kind of blown away by that particular piece right there. So can you talk about that a little?
Yes, yes. This was actually, I created these moss pieces individually separate, or separately for an installation piece that I did in the art building. So we had to, it was for a sculpture class, and we had to do an installation piece that kind of took over a space, but didn't kind of like prohibit people from being able to use it still. So I wanted to initially, there's like this weird spinning door into the dark room that's nobody uses anymore in the basement, and I wanted it to look like a weird, like, kind of cave. But nobody goes down there, so I ended up putting them all over the stairs. So I kind of like yarn bombed the stairs a little bit, and created these weird mossy things. And so these were all hanging off of like the railings for a long time, and then I wanted to be able to turn them into something that also kind of felt like maybe a portal or something. So I transformed it and put it onto a frame. So yeah, but it's all crochet and stuff and tie knots. Yeah.
So I do have a quick question. So I'm looking at the drawings, and a couple of them in particular look like they might have started as still lives, or can you talk about those some, and then how you decided to, like, you know, what your process was for changing those? Or
Yeah. The one study back there was actually it was a drawing from someone else, and then it was gessoed over, and so that one I kind of was like sort of responding to and pulling different elements out of it. So I think the original drawing was of a still life, and then I could only see parts of it, and like the checkered fabric came through and a couple of other structures, and so then I kind of created this landscape on top of it. And that one I kind of created in response to looking at one of my favorite artists, Lenore Carrington, and so I was kind of trying to emulate her style a little bit. But yeah, that was kind of influenced by still life. And then this one was also a still life drawing that I did. It was objects that we painted, and then we made them three-dimensional again. So some of those objects in there are actually like ink paintings or ink drawings that then were mixed in with real three-dimensional objects. So it's got a little bit of a weird like space to it to begin with. And then I wanted to kind of create some sort of weird dimension by adding in like a little portal, or as Tim said, to Emilyify it. So
That was a good
yeah,
move.
thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the original drawing was really beautiful, but when I came in, I was like, so nice, such a great move.
Well, and just kind of seeing those little portals as I'm looking through, it's like, so even though those feel like there's parts of it that are in reality, like it starts to morph it into these more dreamlike scapes, or pushes them into the same space that like that painting starts to do, so really it's connecting them together.
I also really loved as a kid like any books where like people were like shrinking down and like really small amongst normal sized spaces, and so something about still lifes like make me feel like I'm a small person, like I'm walking amongst the different objects in them. So that was kind of a little bit of an inspiration with this one.
So I noticed, because I've seen some of these pieces around Wilson and then in French, and I've always been so impressed with the work. You have a lot of the checkerboard pattern to them, and then this one over here has the checkerboard on the side, and I always forget about the space in between the canvas front and the wall. I was like, yeah, it's not there. But then you added that to that, so this was a long-winded way of saying, why do you gravitate towards the checkerboard pattern?
I honestly don't really know. I really love it for whatever reason. I mean, also part of my show title came from my love of Alice in Wonderland, and so that was a big influence in like my art journey too. And I love that movie and the checkered floors and everything, and it's just so fascinating to me. So I don't know. I love checkers. I don't really know why, but yeah.